Folks, it is week 14. Basically, every good fantasy football team is on bye, and the Lions are playing on Thursday night. So we are scraping through the Isaac Urendo week as we sweat all of our best ball teams through in the finals. This is Thinking About DFS. Let's get to it. It's Short King Summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's Short King Summer. Mr. Sanderson, we are here. We are in week 14. You and I have a high stakes team that needs to get about 147 points this week, I think, to kind of feel safe about advancing to the championship round of the NFFC primetime. Week 13. How did it go? How did it go for you? You have any sweats?
Yeah, couple. I mean, it's been a rough year, unsurprisingly overall, but yeah, had a couple of 350s advance from last week into the finals. Probably the best ball week I've had like the entire year. I have finally dug myself out of negative advance rate territory. Literally for the first time this entire season, I've finished a week at a positive advance rate. So I don't think that's going to hold this week with some of the buys, but you never know. Yeah, excited for the week 15 through 17 sprint just to receive confirmation that I'm losing a lot of money this year, but then I don't have to pretend anymore.
Well, I have heard from a reliable source, it only takes one. I've continually heard that it only takes one. I remember Corain telling me the team he got to the final, he's like, this team stinks, dude. It's got 3 quarterbacks, got Daniel Jones. What am I doing here? So it truly only takes one, and this week it's only going to take one of our teams.
Come on, Steelers. Just shut down Barkley in week 15, and then everything is possible. If Barkley can have like 6 points in week 15, there's no limit.
I mean, it happened 3 weeks ago. Barkley had 8 points in a win. So stranger things have happened, of course.
It looked like it was going to happen this week until he broke the one at the very end.
It's what he does. All right, let's get into it. Let us begin with finally an appropriately priced Devin A-Chain, the Miami Dolphins against the New York Footballing Jets. I will offer this to you. Are we done with Tyreek? Is Tyreek in this version of the Dolphins with the wrist injury? Is he just a different player? Is he a kind of a PPR scam merchant? The Dolphins have all these, 9-play drives. Jonnu Smith gets the ball every other play. What are we doing with Tyreek?
I mean, he was solid last week at like 20. It's just that used to be the floor for Tyreek Hill last year.
Exactly.
I don't know. It's hard for me to just blame the wrist because it's just this entire offense has been reconstituted. Like, I think a lot of it must have to do with line play. A lot of it must have to do with the defensive trends. But like, you look at the fact that they basically can't run the ball at all this year after being very efficient running the ball last year. Then they can't get Waddle involved, and they can barely get Hill involved. And I just think there's too much weirdness going on with talented players in this offense for me to sort of find individual reasons for each of it. Like, it has to be something that's more systemic from an offensive line perspective.
Well, the offensive line's been awful. Yeah.
Right? Because everything, all the entire offense has just become now that you can rely on every week is you're going to throw the ball 8 to 10 times each to Devon Achane and Jonnu Smith. And that seems to be the main stuff that they can rely on. I can see Miami having a pretty good week this week, mostly because I just think the Jets have kind of quit. So who knows? And I don't even know if Gardner's going to play this week. So I think you could definitely talk yourself into playing a couple of the Miami guys at lower ownership. It's just tougher to stack up Miami these days when it's not as obvious. It used to always be like, oh, you want to stack up Miami? Well, you play Tua and 2 of Achane and the receivers. Now it's a little trickier where you got Jonnu is just clearly a dude at this point that you have to consider every single week. And if you're going to play Miami, now you have to try and hit the right pieces. And you kind of lose that consolidation effect that used to be part of the big appeal.
The very appealing thing about all these pieces, about Tua stacks, Tua with Achan, Tua with Tyreek, honestly, even Jonnu, is they really, just due to the way this slate is going to play out, are not going to be owned. And this is certainly a Jets defense. I know they showed a little bit of fight last week. The Jets did not entirely give up, but like we are firmly into the territory of no one cares about this football team. Like we could have at any moment, we could have the Chargers game against the Raiders last year where they gave up like 1 billion points to the Raiders, where just everyone actively quits. Now, I don't know if it's going to happen this week. It might not happen at all. And that's the kind of thing that you sort of have to, you got to play it. You got to play it as if it is a possibility, not an inevitability, because every time I think that the Jets are going to flat quit, like last week, I thought that was it. I thought, all right, well, Ken Walker's going to run for 150 yards. Rodgers like threw a block in the open field last week. Like, I don't know what's going on. What I will say is I will not be investing with my own money in Breece Hall, in Garrett Wilson, and Aaron Rodgers, and Devontae Adams.
I'm not going to be doing that.
The other thing is, with Barkley in such the nut spot this week, this will be like the lowest owned that Achan has been in a slate for the whole season. So I will probably make a minimum of one Achan team in like my 5 to 10 single entry type things. And yeah, the rushing efficiency has not been there for him literally all season. He's actually been like a below rush yards over expectation guy, which if you put that on my bingo card for the year, I've been like, well, if he stays healthy, there's literally no chance that happens. But I also don't think he's like meaningfully worse as a player or anything. In fact, I think he looks great pretty much every time he gets the ball. So a 200-yard rushing game could happen at any time.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy. And when you're watching it, he gets the ball a ton in the receiving game. He always looks great every time he gets the ball in the receiving game. He's been more efficient this year in the receiving game by far than last year. So I think it's just the distribution of the plays. I think he's in play every single week for sure. More expensive this week, but the ownership comes down with that. I'll definitely be playing Achan at this ownership.
All right. Man, I really wish I knew the way that this game would go, because it's a big deal for my bags personally. We have the Kirk Cousins revenge / seeing your old girlfriend doing way better without you game. The Atlanta Falcons are traveling to play in Minnesota. Team total of 20 for the Falcons, team total of 26 for the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Jefferson is below $8,000 on DraftKings. Sam Darnold projects as one of the best quarterback values. The Falcons basically just get ran over by every offense against them. We playing Bijan here in kind of a tricky spot, I think, for him. London gets 16 targets last week. It is now less expensive. This is kind of the chalk game of the week, the Falcons and the Vikings.
Yeah, it's not an ideal Bijan spot. Minnesota tends to be a better run defense than pass defense. And then it always is going to come down a little bit to game plan here with what the Falcons decide to do. Minnesota's always going to throw blitzes at you. I expect that's going to be especially the case with Kirk Cousins, who's been so immobile this year. And then the question is just, does that mean that it's a lot of checkdowns for Bijan, or does that mean that he gets held into block more often? And those things can always go both ways. I suspect, based on how uninvolved Kyle Pitts was last week, maybe we see more Charlie Warner snaps on some of these passing downs, and then they get Bijan out in a route, rather than if it's Pitts, maybe it's Bijan that has to be blocking more often. That would be how I could see this going. So probably I see the ceiling there. London, I think, is the great fit, right? If you're thinking of how, if we're getting the ball out fast against this team, I think London has a lot of opportunities, and they move him into the slot on occasion as well. So I'm pretty interested in that side. Do you think Kirk Cousins can find it within him to be serviceable in a revenge spot, or is it just Jover? Because that was horrendous last week. It's become horrendous enough weeks in a row now.
That's the thing. When was the last time?
That was a classic Kirk Cousins game. Like, it's been like a month now of him just stinking up the joint.
The last time he was good was against Dallas. Not really sure that counts. I suppose he was good against Tampa. He's been very good in the 2 games against Tampa Bay, but mostly Kirk Cousins has erred on the side of being ass this season. He cannot move in the pocket at all. And the overall offense is kind of just like, well, Let's see if we can scheme up something for Drake London. If Drake London wins his route, then we probably complete this. Maybe Darnell Mooney gets something, and then Ray McLeod is kind of like the safety valve. I will say I would certainly not be surprised to see Kirk Cousins get 370 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. Like, I can just very easily see that in my mind's eye. The complicating factor is just like how good the Minnesota defense has been. I mean, they have been so unbelievably good as a passing defense. They generate a ton of pressure. Right now, the Minnesota Vikings are the second best defense in the NFL in expected points added. They are the 9th best defense in terms of net adjusted yards per passing attempt. But part of that is scoreline effects that is not adjusted for the fact that they're winning all these games. Man, I don't know. They have allowed 18 passing touchdowns and they have 18 interceptions. I'm probably more on the Darnold, Jefferson, Hawkinson side of this game. That's where I'm leaning right now. And Aaron Jones, I think, is he's a little bit under projected and a little bit under. Like, I actually maybe a hot take. I'd rather have Jones in this game than Bijan at their prices. I mean, I think this is a bad Bijan spot.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable. The guys that I'll mention quick that I think if you happen to stack this game, and I don't know that I will, to be honest, I don't know if that's going to be where I come down this weekend, but if I was going to stack this game up in a main lineup, I would want to include at least one of Mooney or Addison, if not both, in that
For
stack,
sure.
where those are the guys that are probably going to be drawing under 10% ownership, maybe in Mooney's case, even under 5% ownership. And in both cases, I think that one of them hitting on a 40, 50-yard play is the easiest way you see this game getting sped up and hitting in a big systemic way. So I think those are the two guys you want to keep an eye on. If you're stacking this game, make sure that they're a part of it.
For sure. All right, let's move on now to a game with one play. The New Orleans Saints are traveling to play against the New York Giants. For some reason, they're still playing this game. I'm not really sure why, but now that Taysom Hill is out for the season, the player that I'm interested in this game is Alvin Kamara. I guess maybe a little bit of Tracy. You could talk me just because he's cheap. He's 5,800, but Kamara is 8,000 DraftKings dollars. He no longer has Taysom. Every week he projects for 1 billion points. No one ever wants to play him. Is this finally the week that he scores 2 touchdowns? Yeah, Kamara is a really awesome play, particularly with how much ownership I think a $9,000 Barkley is going to get.
Yeah. I mean, Kamara's going to get a ton of ownership on his own, but the floor is going to be obscenely high with him, with no Taysom. Like, in this matchup against the quitting New York Giants, without any Taysom Hill, it feels like he's coming preloaded with like 20 carries, and I don't see how he's getting less than 4 yards per carry against the Giants. You could also probably lock him in for 7 to 8 to 9 targets, and their team total's all right. So it's like, I don't ever like playing Alvin Kamara because I think he's kind of dusty, and I think there's lots of ways for him to not reach a mega ceiling. But this might be the week I change that, even at high ownership. This is going to be a pretty big smash spot this week.
Yeah, and I've not run a ton of sims yet or anything, and it's Thursday, so there's time left. But I am just imagining the scenario on Sunday where Barkley is way overowned for his projection, and I'm going to return a bunch of these lineups that do have Kamara and Bijan and all these guys. And Kamara's going to do his thing, and the cards are going to turn over, and Kamara's going to be 16% owned instead of 27% owned. It's going to be like, oh my God, look at all the Sklanskys. And then Barkley just gets, 50 points or whatever. I'm not into Neighbors, by the way, at 6.9. I get it. His touchdown expectation is just so low. The PPR scamming with either Locke or DeVito is not going to be enough. Oh, and I actually should mention Jauan Johnson. His route rate with Taysom off the field is going to be really high. He's cheap. Could be a 2 tight end week. Johnson was the week 17 hero last year. So you could talk me into Jauan Johnson, and people will want us to mention MVS. I'll just say I'm not playing the guys getting 3 targets a week, but you can if you want, for sure.
Yeah, I kind of refuse to do this MVS stuff, but it obviously he's playable. I I'm glad you brought up Jauan Johnson. I wanted to bring him up. Massive agree. I'm curious to see how much steam he gets up over the week, but I'm going to make him a fixture. I think in most of my lineups. I've been including Jauan Johnson even with Taysom. That's been exceptionally annoying that he has never been able to really pay off on that. But I'm certainly going to play him now without Taysom. And I agree with you on Neighbors too. I mean, his floor is totally fine. You could start him in a managed league, but it feels like he basically, no matter what happens, he's going to end up with like 7 for 70 and 0. And that's basically what you're looking at with Malik Neighbors. Don't think that his ceiling is on par with other folks that project similarly at a median level at his price.
Yeah,
I'll note Tracy as I mean, I've been really enjoying Tracy most of the season, but Saints defense has been terrible against the run the entire season. He's down there. If you don't want to play Kamara and you somehow can talk yourself into the Giants winning this game at 5.8 and probably right now projecting in the 10% ownership range, I think Tracy's would be the way that I would leverage off of the Kamara play. Or you could even play them together if you think that Kamara then just gets there with path catching.
Yeah, I think I probably won't play him, but maybe. I don't know. This game feels like it's going to be awful. It's just going to be like very low scoring. Feels like really just Kamara to me. All right, man, we got to do it. The Barkley stuff. The Carolina Panthers traveling to play at Philadelphia. Very low team total, lower than I thought it would be. 16.5 team total for Carolina. 29.5 point team total for the Eagles. Barkley is projected right now for 24.62 points in the blitz and 25% ownership. Dallas Goedert is not going to play in this game. Looks like Devonta Smith is going to play in this game. Jacob, what say you about Barkley this week?
Wow. I mean, what is to say about Saquon Barkley? He averages 27 points per game over the last month.
A lot of points.
Now he gets the worst defense in the NFL. I understand the desire to play the man. Yeah, I mean the only thing with him at 9K is like he's gonna need to score an obscene amount of points.
He's got to get the bonus. So he's got to get the bonus, and scoring once might be okay if it's a lower scoring slate.
No,
but if it ends up being you need 187 to win, he does. He's probably got to get 28 points or something like that.
I mean, it all depends on what other guys do, right? I mean, but your roster could be so limited with 9K Barkley. So I think that he is priced high enough that you don't have to like live in complete fear where you feel like you have to play Barkley. There's other ways to get there, because if you do play Barkley and there are other guys that are high priced that go for 30, 40 points this week that you don't have access to, that's the way to get there. He doesn't have to fail for him to not be in the winning lineup this week. He could have 25 points and there can be better combinations out there. But I'm not going to full fade him just based on how good it's been. I mean, this Carolina defense is bad in all forms. It's not like they're exclusively bad against the run. So I will point out AJ Brown, I think, or Devonta Smith.
God, last week was so annoying, man.
To get off of Barkley, dude, it was so annoying. It started so well, like Brown was crushing in the first half, and then they just never even went to him again.
He literally did not record a target in the second half of that game, and yeah. I can very easily see that returning. I was ready to go back to our man Calcaterra, but he's priced up. He's 3,500. I was ready for him to be 2,800. I will say I will be playing some old man Thielen this week. We are returning to, I don't even know if it's fair to call what Thielen was doing last year a PPR scam, because he is actually just a very good player. So last year, starting in week 3, Thielen went 11, 145 and 1, 776, 11, 107 and 1, 11, 115 and 1, 8 for 72. And then he super trailed off because he basically remembered that he's 34 years old, but the man just came off the IR. He spent the last, 2 months on the exercise bike, eating good, rehabbing. He is good to go. I think Thielen at 5,300 in this spot. I know the passing matchup has actually been quite difficult against Philadelphia. We thought it was going to be a good matchup to start the year. I think Thielen and Devonta Smith are very good ways to leverage off of the chalk spots in this game, because Devonta at 5.8, I mean, he can get there on 4 targets at 5.8.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. Coker projected back in this week. Who do we think his routes come from? Do they come from David Moore?
I think probably
the
I think probably the 30-year-old guy on his 5th NFL team who was on Denver's practice squad last year probably is the one who. I mean, it could be Leggett. I think not, but Thielen is. I mean, come on, you're not taking Adam Thielen off the field. He's like the one really professional wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable.
And then Hurts. So you could do this galaxy brain move, Hurts naked, and just say Barkley gets 180 rushing yards but doesn't score a touchdown because Hurts takes all of them. I'm kind of partial to that. I don't know if I'll do it, but I do understand the impetus. Yeah.
That'd be the way to do it for sure. I mean, I think all these other Eagles are good plays. Hurts, Brown, Smith. And it's easy to see how that could make sense. I would say that I don't think it's necessary, though, to leverage off Barkley when he's 9K, because I think the easiest way for him to not pay off at 9K is that he does have a good game. He has 26 fantasy points, but some other player, and it doesn't necessarily have to be one of his teammates that's high price, scores 35, and you couldn't have played them together. And then Barkley's not going to get in any of the optimal lineups at that point. So to me, it feels scary, I think, to just not click an Eagle in the spot. But I think that if you don't have that, I think that's totally fine. I'll play Barkley in some, though. I have spent an entire year of fading Saquon Barkley. It's been incredibly painful. I intend to do it again in the gauntlet and see how much that hurts. I'm not recommending you do it this week. You can play Saquon Barkley in DFS if you want to get even. It's fine.
No, I sure am not. All right, this game is fascinating to me. We have the Cleveland Browns with an 18.5 point team total, traveling to play at Pittsburgh with a 25 point team total. I will say that Browns team total seems a bit light to me. I am way more interested in these Browns players than the market seems to be. Jameis is 5.4, Judy is 5.7, and Njoku is 5.1. Tillman, who I don't think is going to play, is there. Elijah Moore got banged up and actually came back in last week. Ended up, he had a 44-yard reception at one point. Michael Woods, actually, by the way, played as the second wide receiver, which I did not anticipate. But that's actually huge for Moore, Njoku, and Judy, because Woods is like a creative player. He's not out there to get any targets. I am very into Jameis stuff this week. I mean, you can buy into the Tomlin stuff all you want, but if Jameis wants to throw it 47 times, Jameis is going to throw it 47 times. It don't. And these guys are clearly playing very hard. That's the other thing, is these dudes are all out there. I mean, they're leaving it all on the table in what is a totally lost season. So this will be the place where I am most differentiated from the field, I think.
Yeah, that's reasonable. The Jameis stuff is tough because it like last week, it felt immediately, it was just like, okay, this is going to go well for the Jameis life. But it's not been the case every week. Like the Chargers week, there was nothing going on. The Steelers snow game, there's nothing going on. Granted, the elements were a factor in that too. Steelers defense is tough. They get Highsmith back this week, but we did just see them get shredded in comeback mode by Joe Burrow. And the Browns defense has been pretty terrible recently. So I definitely see the upside path here to get to the Jameis doubles for sure. And it's nice that we get it at low ownership compared to, I think it was 2 weeks ago against the Saints or whatever that was when that was a lot more popular. So yeah, I think it's definitely viable. I am surprised. I mean, I think the Judy ownership is just going to be higher than it's shown.
Judy will be
watched him in prime time look like
17%.
Randy Moss.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be up there, and it should be. He's been fantastic over the last month plus. Yeah, I think that would be. I think probably would want to make. I don't know. Probably we want Jameis and like Elijah. One of Judy and Njoku is probably the move. I mean, you could play Judy and Njoku; they're not that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, if you do Jameis, Judy, and Njoku, you can fit Barkley without having to do a tight end at flex. That's saving money at a bunch of spots. And by the way, you want Tillman out if you're doing that, because Tillman sort of complicates everything. Tillman,
for sure it does. You do.
Tillman will kind of split the down the field stuff with Jeudy, but it's pretty clear with Tillman out. I mean, it's been very clear the last 2 weeks. Jerry Jeudy leads the NFL in receiving yards since Jameis took over. Now, obviously, a part of that is his insane game in prime time. But this to me feels like a real spot where people like me who use the numbers but don't just run pure optimals are going to kind of try and jam it. And then the pure optimal solver bros are not going to play a ton of this. In fact, I'll tell you right now, Browns doubles are going to sim very bad because they're going to be over-owned relative to what their projections are, because the projections say they have an 18-point team total against this great defense. And then, by the way, you can definitely do Russell and Pickens. I mean, that just kind of every week. Like I'm done. Speaking of not losing money on Barkley, I'm done fighting against the idea that Russell Wilson can't be a productive fantasy quarterback anymore. Like he just very clearly is.
What was happening for the last 2 years? What was he doing for the last 2 years?
I guess he was just a bad fit for Peyton. I don't know.
And I guess everyone's a bad fit for Hackett. I saw the comp that Russell Wilson's Denver years might be like Kurt Warner's New York years. Like he had his LA years in Seattle, and now he's in his Arizona years with Pittsburgh.
Even the last year in Seattle was not particularly good. Brady had this, by the way. I mean, Brady was ass that final year in New England. People do kind of forget that.
Yeah,
I don't know. He's a good player. He is clearly a good fit for what our boy Art wants to do. Najee, by the way, the PPR scam. Never thought that would happen, but he is. I mean, I probably won't play him if he is 16% owned, but he certainly is playable at 6,000.
Yeah, he is. I probably won't do that. I'll probably just play Tracy, who I think has a pretty similar role, but and it's gonna be half the ownership. But yeah, I definitely think Najee's playable.
Yeah. All right, this game actually is probably more important figuring out than Atlanta and in Minnesota. We have the Las Vegas Raiders traveling to play at Tampa Bay. Team total of 20 for the Raiders, 26.5 for the Buccaneers. We got Baker, we got Bowers, we got Evans, we got Bucky, we have Jacoby Myers, we have Mr. Aiden O'Connell at 4.8, who I think is theoretically a play. We got Kate Otten at 4,400. If you want to be a Sklansky bro, Rashad White and Bucky Irving played the same number of snaps last week, in part because Bucky got banged up, but Bucky will be banged up in this game. I don't think his hip is going to heal in a week. I expect him to play. I don't expect him to be 100%. We have the Madison, McCormick, Abdullah, Raiders backfield. My gut in this game is that Bucky is probably the slappy play of the week, where he gets way overowned relative to his projection.
Yeah, possibly overowned Bucky Irving. He's the greatest.
I just, there's enough weirdness with White still being in there.
He also had 26 touches versus 12 for White.
I'm just saying.
Tucker played big old 0 snaps last week, so that was big.
Yeah, I just if I had to offer you Baker and Evans at 18% cumulative ownership versus Bucky himself at just 20% ownership.
Can I play all three?
You can. That I think would be a good way to approach it, actually.
I just look at Bucky at 6K or 6.6K versus the Raiders at right now I'm looking at projected at 16. Maybe that gets to 20. I don't know. That feels like it should be 40. I want to be doing that. This kind of feels to me like he feels like the H out of last year, where it's like we're buying
that's
in
a good comp. That is a good.
We're not buying in quite enough. The guy's just a baller. The role is increasing literally every week. He's getting a higher touch count relative to White by each week. I've been hammering Bucky Irving each of the last 2 weeks in this run of glorious matchups. Against the Giants, did it again against the Panthers. Definitely doing it again here for sure.
Yeah.
But I would do the Baker Evans stuff for sure too. I've done all three together. I've done just Baker Evans. I've done just Bucky. It hasn't really fully paid off yet to a massive way, but I've definitely been very in on these Buck stuff.
Now, Bowers is getting to the point that you could make a pretty convincing argument that he is not great chalk, but the sense I get is that the field will prefer to pay for Barkley as opposed to jamming in a 6.5K tight end. Like if I had to wager one way or the other on 11% projected ownership, I'd probably take the slight under, which then makes me back in on Bowers. I don't know. Yeah. It's like the role is also so unbelievably good. Jakobi Meyers is, I believe, the textbook definition of a leverage play. And I never like these cheap, shitty quarterbacks who don't run, but I do kind of like AOC this week. Like every quarterback just kind of gets there against them.
AOC is a totally viable play. Tampa matchup is incredible. And AOC threw like literally 85% of his passes to Myers and Bowers last week. So it's an incredible matchup. And if you want to play AOC, you know exactly where the ball is going. So there's like no issues about that. You just play him with Myers or Bowers or both. And if you want to play Bowers plus a Barkley or Kamara, the only way that that's even possible is to play 4.8K AOC, really. So I think he's absolutely in play. And I'm with you. I also never really do this. I do think this will be the exception to the rule. I think I will play an AOC lineup this week.
Yeah, I think I will if it appears as if that will not be a popular route. But if like Dinkmeyer goes on Establish the Million and flag plants AOC Jakobi Meyers, then that becomes terrible. I think like Aiden O'Connell at 11% is generationally terrible. Okay. Man, this game should have been fun for fantasy. It's going to be awful. The Jacksonville Jaguars traveling to play at the Tennessee Titans. Pollard, very good play. He is 6,400. Brian Thomas Jr. did not get a price spike, even with Mac Jones. I think he's fine, and I will simply do it again. I am the and I'll do it again meme with one Mr. Evan Ingram. He's damn. I forget who said this to me. I think it was Peter said. Evan Ingram isn't even a PPR merchant. He's just a target merchant. It's just targets. He doesn't catch them. He's just a targets merchant. But he's the same price as he was last week. He got, I don't know, what did he get? 13 targets last week or something? Probably not that many. He got a bunch. Evan Ingram last week in a game that his quarterback had like a fencing response. He had 9 targets, which was tied for his second most this season. I don't know. Could this game be fun? Probably not. Talk to me about our Jacksonville boys.
There are only 2 plays that I'm interested in this game. The first one, the one that I'm most excited to play, is Calvin Ridley. I mean, we get the revenge game narrative. That's always interesting. He's also just had very strong usage over the last month plus. And then the other one that's notable, I would never play him at his current projected ownership. But like one of the fun things I think we get to see with the projected ownership on Thursday morning is not that it's accurate, but that it shows kind of a little bit of what the ownership would be if we exclusively left it up to the Sims and to the numbers instead of to our own human ambition. And like seeing Tony Pollard projected for more ownership than Bucky Irving at only $200 less is like, immediately I see that and I'm like, that's not going to be the case on Sunday. Like just based on where the sentiment is at about these offenses, these players, it's also not what I would want to do. But I suspect if we see what I think we'll see, which on Sunday, which is Pollard's ownership is closer to 10 and Bucky's is closer to between 20 and 25, then this is kind of telling us in advance that Tony Pollard is probably a pretty good play. So those would be the 2 guys, Pollard and Calvin Ridley.
You're not in on BTJ. I
with Mac Jones. No, I'm not playing BTJ with Mac Jones at all. Not even thinking about it.
What about Ingram?
What's the point of Evan Ingram? Like,
I mean,
as an NFL player, as a fantasy asset,
it could just be a shitty week. 10 receptions for 64 yards could pretty easily do it.
Yeah, but 4.8 is like a little much to pay for. I don't know. I'm either going to be paying up at tight end or I'm just going to play Jauan. I don't think I'm going to get it or Calc or whatever. I don't think I'm going to live in the Ingram range.
Yeah. All right, that's fair.
But I see how you're getting there. I see how you're getting there for sure.
All right, let's do Seattle at Arizona, a game that every time these two teams play, every time these fucking NFC West games, it's like, the total's always 46.5. We all every piece is owned, and then it ends up being 13-3, and it's the most disappointing game of the entire slate. We've got Kyler with a pretty strong projection, Connor with a great projection, McBride almost projected more than Bowers, JSN is ascending, Metcalf is cheap, Marvin Harrison Jr. is cheap. Can we just get one NFC West game where they actually trade blows? I'm begging. No. I'm simply begging. The answer is
it's gonna be no. It's a lot of ownership for a second divisional matchup within like 3 weeks. That would be my take. I mean, I don't know if that's like a boomer thing to care about. Maybe the Sims are more wise, but historically, second divisional matchups, a little lower scoring. I have to imagine that's even more the case when they just played literally like 2 weeks ago. So I'm seeing a lot of ownership on this game. I don't think I'm going to get there. Maybe I'll play like a Connor or a Walker. That's probably it for me.
Surely Ken Walker will, in fact, have a 60-yard run at some point, right? Because the usage has actually gotten better. The usage actually continues to get better, and he just can't get there.
Yeah, I would really, really love Ken Walker to have a 60-yard touchdown run. One of these weeks is going to do it. I'm going to be playing him every week, so come on, Ken.
Do you like Connor or Walker more? I assume they'll both be hovering right around in that 10% owned range.
I like Walker more. I always like Walker more. I especially like it in this matchup more. I think that Arizona's going to invite you to run a little bit more. Seattle's going to invite you to throw a little bit more. So I like Walker more, but I don't know. I've liked Walker basically every single week this season, and it worked a lot early in the season. It's not gone as well recently, but the role's fantastic still. He combines a lot of receiving upside with what we know is an ability to break off those 70, 80-yard touchdown runs. Just because we haven't seen it this year, I maintain that still exists within him. Yeah, and a really strong matchup. And a price that's like $1,000 lower than a price we were all willing to play him at, basically 6 weeks ago in the same role, just he had been running hotter. And now he's only going to be owned at this new price. So I'm very, very in on Ken Walker this week and every week.
I'm tempted to do Marvin Harrison Jr. again. Scores a touchdown last week. Jonathan Gannon says before the game, we're going to run the passing offense through him. Trey McBride gets, 19 receptions again. I wish, man. I wish. I probably will play one Marvin Harrison Jr. as a one-off. Probably just one as a treat.
All right.
And I like Metcalf here as well. I'm not buying this ownership projection at all. In fact, literally just before we started, I saw an article from some place. It was like, is JSN Seattle's wide receiver 1 now? To which I don't buy. DK Metcalf is a much better NFL player than JSN, which is not to say that JSN is bad. JSN is I think really turning the corner as an NFL player, but Metcalf is better than him. All right, let's do the Isaac Guerendo talk. He's kind of the guy that the whole slate swings on. We have the Chicago Bears traveling to play at San Francisco. Famously good run defense for the Chicago Bears this year. This is what I think about Guerendo. I think that Guerendo is not a guy who gets the scheme at all, and that is why he is behind Mason, despite being certainly is a better runner than Mason, right? More powerful, more explosive, but doesn't get the zone blocking scheme. Kyle Juszczyk is going to play all the third downs in this game. I think that is, Kyle Juszczyk was playing the third downs when Mason was in, so he's really going to play the third downs when Guerendo is in. Is Purdy healthy? Is Purdy not healthy? Do the 49ers care? I don't even know. Like, what are the 49ers' chances if they win out? Can they even make the playoffs?
No, they're toast.
And then can the Bears push them at all? Can we get Caleb and Keenan Allen? The Bears guys all project pretty well, but it's like split between 4 guys. I'm leaning on just pressing the lock button on Guerendo. Now, maybe next week or the week after, we see some Abanikanda, some Patrick Taylor. But this week, I think he gets 16 rushes for 82 yards. And if he scores a touchdown, he'll be in the optimal. If he doesn't score a touchdown, he will not. But I am leaning on the side of him being a very good play, particularly because of actually Purdy's shoulder injury, where it's like they're just first and second down, they're just handing the ball off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of two minds about this. The first is, historically, I have always, and generally I think, had more success than not. If a running back is going to be super highly owned, I just ask, like, what is their path to a ceiling? And if their path to a ceiling does not involve the receiving game, and it involves having to either get 82 or 101, then I'm usually fading that player at the level of ownership we're going to see on Garendo. The other mind that I have of it is that, I don't think there's really any other running back there. Patrick Taylor is I don't think going to be that much of a factor. He was more of a factor the first time Garendo had to play. When Mason went out in game, he was not very much of a factor.
If Matt Breida was on this roster, I'd be terrified. Straight up,
right?
I'd be terrified.
What are you up to, Tevin? What are you up to, Tevin?
They've called him. I'll tell you this. I bet my last dollar they called him.
Yeah. Is Mike Anderson available? Is Ruben Drones available? Is Tatum Bell on the horn? Anyway, we can just play name that Shanahan running back. But so that would be the concern with Garendo. The other side is that, yeah, Taylor, I think, was getting diminished involvement each time we've seen the Garendo experience happen. Debo would normally my answer, if you told me 6 weeks ago this was happening, my immediate response would have just been like, ignore the Garendo bullshit. Just play Debo. He's going to see 40% of the carries and all the receiving. But he is washed. So I don't know what to do about Debo Samuel either. So I think that it is going to mostly be Garendo. And in that case, we're looking at, okay, like, remember the early season Jordan Mason thing where it was like, he's in the mid fives and, he's going to be 25% owner. Like, oh, I don't know if we should play, and then he's smashed. And then, give it a few more weeks, all of a sudden he's in the mid sevens and he's still being 20% owned. And so maybe you just be grateful for the 1 week to play it at 5.4K, and he actually is a better play than I'm giving him credit for. The other problem too is, like, it used to be with the 49ers, back with the Mason stuff, there was all sorts of ways to leverage how chalky he was because there were so many other intriguing options. I have no interest in playing Brock Purdy right now. Like, I'm going to need the guy with the shoulder injury to show me that he's.
I'm a little interested because he played the whole game against the Bills. I mean, he played like shit.
Yeah, and he scored like 2 fantasy points.
But it's like snow game. You're down immediately. The defense gives up. Like, I can just the fact that he played, and like I expected that to go horribly. But you got to remember, Brock Purdy is what was he? Was he literally the last pick of the draft? Yeah. Like, this is not a man who's made his money yet. He's got to keep playing. Like, Purdy wants to put as much.
I believe that he wants to play well. I just think that he's clearly hurt.
Yeah, no, he is clearly hurt. He is clearly hurt. I'm a little. I started out being not interested, but Purdy doubles when he was healthy. It's like my favorite thing to do, and now I can do Purdy, Garendo, Jennings, all below the average cost for roster spot on DraftKings. I'm pretty into Jennings, by the way. 5,200 Jauan Jennings. I mean, he's the outfielder. By the way, the last game Deebo Samuel generated more than -1 rushing yards was on November 10th against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That was the last time that Deebo Samuel generated more than -1 rushing yards. So
that's yikes. Yeah, I think I agree with Jennings, right? I'm going to try and talk myself into the Deebo leverage play. I don't think I'm going to get there. He just hasn't been good enough right now for a while. He hasn't been explosive enough. Jennings, I think, is interesting. And then I don't know if I'm going to get there. I would like to think that I am ballsy enough to get there, but I don't know if that's true. But no one's going to be playing George Kittle. People are going to play everybody else,
including me. By the way, just give me Bowers and give me McBride.
Because is George Kittle the number one, or did Bowers probably passed him this week? He's probably the tight end 2 in points per game this season now.
Bowers is in half PPR. Bowers is ahead by like 25 points.
Okay. So, I mean, I feel like it's a little crazy that like Ayuk's out, they're down to their third string running back, and every other 49er is owned except for the one 49er who's been consistently awesome all year. And it's just going to be 3% ownership on that guy. I don't know if I'm going to get as high as making him my gold star play, but I'm noticing. I think it's notable.
And then I do think the 2 Chicago wide receivers, DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, are good plays. I've seen enough from Caleb. One of those guys, I mean, particularly Moore.
Caleb has a higher projection than Jameis, by the way, if you're paying attention for a certain primetime team.
I don't know. Well, we're really gonna have to think through that one because it is gonna be a pretty big decision for us. All right.
Yeah.
Let's finish up here with the Buffalo Bills at the Los Angeles Footballing Rams. Josh Allen projects for a lot of points. Puka projects for a lot of points. Kupp projects for fewer points, and less ownership. We have Kyren, who, despite Blake Corum looking good for one drive, is still very much the guy in this backfield. I think Kyren is the sneakiest play of the entire slate, where the Rams are going to get blown out, yada yada. He lost some snaps to Corum, all that stuff. He is giga sneaky this week, and I like Shakir as well.
Yeah, I like all those, and I like Kupp's just like been so inefficient that he really needs to score touchdowns, and he usually does. So, but I don't usually into it. But everybody was all over the Rams wide receivers at these prices last week, and I get that was the Saints. And Buffalo's been very good against limiting outside wide receiver production, but these guys just don't really function as outside wide receivers. So I just don't know if any of that is like applicable to the way that Puka and Kupp have
they just run these little crossers every play. It's just like Demarcus Robinson is the only one who runs quote unquote outside wide receiver routes.
Right. So I don't know that I'm actually that scared of like the Bills defense for these specific players. It's like the way that their passing offense is designed. I mean, maybe the whole offense just fails, but it's very like, the fuck I'm going to do, not get gas. Like I'm not going to throw to Puka Nacua. Like I'm not going to throw to Cooper Kupp. Like who else am I throwing to in this passing game? So I think that them coming in and now like 8-9% owned after being double that last week, pretty intriguing. And here's a fun one. I think everybody's trying to find the money to spend up for Bowers, trying to find the money to spend up for all these running backs. What about Josh Allen? He scores a lot of fantasy points, and it's one of the worst secondaries in the league. They give up a lot of explosive plays. He's going to be I think pretty unowned, and I think is in a pretty excellent spot. I'm definitely going to be flirting with that potential, and I'm stacking with Shakir for sure. And you could probably just single stack that. If you want to play James Cook, maybe you could consider that too. I think he's going to be another guy that's like totally unowned and has a pretty big ceiling.
Yeah, I got no issue. I got no issue with that. I probably am not interested in either of the quarterbacks, really. I don't know. Allen's too expensive. I prefer Hurts. I mean, famous last words. Like Allen can get 30 whenever. The Bills just kind of run. They do run. Obviously, they are much better, but they run their offense like the Chiefs, where it's like everyone kind of gets between 8 to 15.5 PPR points. Like James Cook is giving up work to Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. They don't concentrate targets on anyone, and it'll be good for their playoff stuff, but is very annoying for fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Let us build a lineup. And as always, I will let you begin with whomstever you would like to choose.
All right. I'm just gonna do it because I'm curious how this affects the build this week. So I wanna build one. I will take Aiden O'Connell.
Okay. I love it. I think if he really is like 13%, I think it's generationally bad. But if his projected ownership is projected and real ownership closer to like 5 to 7, then I like it. Yeah, we got to do Bowers with Aiden O'Connell. I don't think there's a unit. Well, I mean, I guess you could do Jacoby Myers, but I am choosing to prefer Mr. Bowers.
I mean, I think you could do both. Honestly, we might end up doing both. All right, I will take Mr. Marquise Bucky Irving.
All right, we can do Bucky, and I'm gonna do Adam Thielen. I'm gonna do Mr. Thielen. That is a take I am on this week, which very unmaticky to be on the
this season is broken, you dog.
Yeah, well, the thing about Thielen is that for as long as he has existed, the guys ran hotter than the sun in the red zone. He scored more touchdowns than Jefferson in Jefferson's breakout season, which people do forget. All right, man. Who would you like next?
All right. Well, we spent all the way down to Aiden O'Connell. The big reason I did that was because I'm very curious whether that makes it how difficult that makes it to make Bowers Barkley lineups. So let's find out.
Do it.
Let's put him in.
All right. So with Aiden O'Connell, Bucky Irving, Barkley, Thielen, and Bowers, we have 4,450 left per slot. There is not an obvious cheap wide receiver this week, which is going to lead to a preponderance, I think, of double tight end lineups. I think if you don't take Guerrero, you should think about taking another 49er. I'm going to take Mr. Jauan Jennings at 5,200 DraftKings dollars. We have 4,200 left per slot. Let's see what we've got for cheap defenses. We've got, if you think Purdy is really hurt, the Bears at 2,400 is pretty strong. And the Browns at 2,400 also seems very strong, but we should take a cheap defense here to get it out of the way.
Yeah, totally fine with that. Cheap wide receiver is like an absolute struggle this week.
Let's just put the Browns in. So now we have 5,100 left per slot.
Hey? Okay. Okay. I think I see the path. 5,100. I'm gonna do Elijah Moore.
Oh,
final wide receiver slot, which will leave you exactly 54. Which you can either take the obvious or you could take a less obvious for that.
So Guerrero, I think, is pretty strong in this construction.
I left you exactly his salary. So
you know what though? For this one, let's get weird and let's do Janu. There would just be an example of a guy, and Janu doesn't even project that much differently. Janu projects for 13. Guerrero projects for 15. So you're giving up 2 points. You're giving up 2 points, but you are gaining probably in small field stuff 35% ownership. Like I would guess in the SPY, Guerrero is going to be 42% or something, and Janu will be like 8%. So that lineup is Aiden O'Connell, Bucky Irving, Saquon Barkley, Adam Thielen, Jauan Jennings, Elijah Moore, Brock Bowers, Jonnu Smith, and the Browns defense. And as always, we will leave you with our gold star plays. Jacob, whomst is your gold star play this week?
All right. I got two that I'm torn between. I expect both to be sub 10% owned. I'll give both. Running back, Ken Walker against the Arizona Cardinals. They've been a run funnel defense for most of the year. I think we've seen Ken Walker go from getting higher and higher and higher in price, all the way up near 8K. People were willing to play him then. Then he came down. People were excited to take the discount. Now nobody even wants to take that at 6.8 for a guy that 6 weeks ago people were talking about as potentially the RB1 rest of season. And his role has not really meaningfully changed since then. It's just been running bad, literally and figuratively. So I'll take Ken Walker there at the running back position. And then George Kittle, the tight end position, is a guy I can't imagine comes in at more than like 2 or 3% owned. There are injuries going on in the San Francisco 49ers. He's been the steady guy all season. If you believe that Purdy can support Jennings or Debo or whatever else, Kittle has the highest true ceiling, I think, of any tight end still, maybe behind Brock Bowers. And we'll gather zero ownership this week with bigger targets up at the expensive tight ends.
All right, I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm also gonna do two. The first is gonna be Jameis doubles, but I reserve the right to retract that if Jameis doubles are also mentioned on every fantasy football podcast for the next 3 days. Like if you're listening to stuff on, if you're listening to whatever, stochastics, just whatever. If Jameis, Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy is gonna be on 8% of rosters, it's generationally terrible. It's just as bad as AOC. But if it is actually gonna be sneaky, if you can get 4% on Jameis, then that is going to be the guy. And then my lone gold star is going to be, I'm going to take the page from your book. It's going to be Jauan Jennings. He led them in receiving last week. He is basically the only good player who can frequently get passes completed to him on the team. Basically everyone else, Debo stinks. Guerrero, who knows? The Vegas line is indicating that the 49ers can win this game and that Purdy is banged up but not dead. So $5,200 Jauan Jennings is going to be my flag plant. Everyone, make sure that you are subscribed to Thinking About Thinking as we head into Gauntlet season. Jacob will have plenty of thoughts there. Please like this video, comment below your gold star play, and Jacob and I will be back with you guys next week. It's Short King Summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's Short